All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Planning and Zoning Commission meeting for Tuesday, May. I'm sorry, I was looking at the wrong one. Tuesday, May 20th. We do have established quorum. Looking for approval of minutes for April 15th.
Mr. Go. You go. Mr. Chair, I make a motion to approve minutes from April 15, 2025.
Got it first?
Second.
Second by Billy. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. None opposed? Recognize this person is not on the agenda this evening. Seeing none. Conflict of interest or ex parte contact declarations. I do have to state that because I work with Elmore County Rescue, we are in somewhat of a conjunction with EAS. I do not work with EAS, but Rescue and EAS are very close in what we do, so I do want to make that publicly known. But any decisions or anything that is made tonight does not impact me personally with impact fees or anything like that. So just to make that known. Anybody else?
Negative.
Okay, so public hearing and action this evening. We have none. There is new business of a discussion for the Elmore County Capital Improvement Plan for the implementation and collection of EMS impact fees on new development within city limits and development impact fees advisory committee's written comments regarding the Elmore County CIP. Brenda?
Okay, so as you mentioned, the CIP, Elmore County has adopted a capital improvement plan, and they would like for the city to collect in some form those impact fees for the EMS portion only currently. In your packet, you'll see that you have the EMS, jail, sheriff, and then you'll also see as you have the fire impact fee ordinances, or not ordinances, but capital improvement plan in there as well. We're only focusing on the EMS currently. They have been, Elmore County has been before City Council with information regarding the CIP, and then we've also, it has been before the Development Impact Fee Advisory Committee. We've had several meetings, and out of all of those meetings, we've done a joint meeting, and then we've also had meetings with our DIFAC alone regarding the subject, and what it's come down to is their written comments regarding that capital improvement plan. And so they are here tonight, our chairman and also another member of the committee here to answer any questions you may have regarding their written facts. At some point, this, if adopted by City Council, and maybe Jeff can help determine what the appropriate path forward will be from here, then we will, as a Planning and Zoning Commission, at some point potentially adopt it into the comprehensive plan.
Okay.
Want to leave anything out, Jeff?
No, that's about right. So your role is to form a recommendation as to whether or not that CIP should be appended to the comprehensive plan, because it needs to be. We have a capital improvement plan for the city. That's an appendix to the existing comp plan that the city has, and this would just be added to that. And so your role is to make recommendations to the City Council as to whether or not the comprehensive plan should be amended to add this CIP. And as you'll see from the written comments filed by the Development Impact Fee Advisory Committee, those comments are both to you regarding your amendment to the comp plan, but also to the governing body regarding adoption of the CIP altogether. And if you've read it, there's some work yet to be done.
And tonight is just discussion only. There is no decision making, and so it's just to kind of bring you up to speed to where this is all set.
Commission, any questions?
To clarify, so we are adding county impact fees to the comprehensive plan? Is that?
The proposal is, the county is currently collecting and assessing development impact fees for a whole bunch of services that they do.
Okay.
Jail, EMS, and sheriff.
Okay.
They seek to do at least the EMS portion in the city of Mountain Home through means of an intergovernmental agreement. In order to do that, the city of Mountain Home, in order to embrace that, would have to enter into an intergovernmental agreement with them, and in so doing also adopt a capital improvement plan for the county. And the county's capital improvement plan for ambulance is the one that they have suggested that we adopt. And 678208 says that such capital improvement plan shall be included as an element of the comprehensive plan.
Okay.
And so anytime a comp plan is amended, the P&Z Commission has to hold a hearing on amending the comp plan. And you would be amending the comp plan by adding a new chapter of the capital improvement plan, to wit, the counties.
Okay, so let's go back. So these impact fees are the impact fees that we are collecting when we do new development? Or is this impact fees that the county is picking up when they do new development?
So it is currently, the city of Mountain Home has its own impact fee structure for development that occurs
Correct.
inside the city limits. The county has adopted an impact fee structure for development that occurs outside the city limits. They wish to be able to, in addition to that, collect development impact fees inside the city limits for the new development inside the city limits to pay for improvements to the ambulance service.
Because the ambulance actually services the city.
Okay.
The reason, my guess is, Jeff, the reason you're not seeing sheriff is the sheriff is county, and it doesn't serve Mountain Home, because Mountain Home Police has its own jurisdiction. But the ambulance serves everything, including city.
Okay, so, but this would only apply to ambulance. It would not apply to anything else.
Correct.
Not to the sheriff, not to any of those stuff.
Correct.
Okay, just to the ambulance.
Yes.
Correct.
And then there's more fine-grained detail about what you're getting at, I think, that the chairman of the Impact Fee Advisory Committee has made clear in their comments about that, also having questions about where the sheds are and who's paying for them, and that sort of, for ambulance. But
Yeah.
But the ask from the county is that the city adopt the Elmore County Capital Improvement Plan for ambulance.
Okay,
That's the ask.
and fire rescue apparently.
No, not rescue. Fire and
Okay.
rescue separate. Fire has their
Okay.
own impact fees.
Just ambulance.
Just
And
ambulance.
just ambulance.
Currently, we're focusing only on the EMS portion. But that's not to say that in the future, they may not come back requesting an additional agreement with regards to jail, to the jail services.
Got it.
Yep.
And that is why I included all of that in there, so that you.
Yeah, there's a
have
lot.
view of it. Yeah, so currently it's just that first portion with EMS, jail, and sheriff.
Rob, you got something?
Yeah, if I may, so I think I read a comment that no agreement like this in Idaho exists. Am I right? Between city and the county? We'd be like the first?
There are intergovernmental agreements between fire districts and cities all over the state.
Right.
It's popping up like dandelions. So
Right,
there isn't one for a countywide system that I'm aware of. Maybe there is, maybe there isn't.
Okay.
I personally don't know.
right.
But there isn't one where a county is collecting countywide development impact fees that I'm aware of.
Okay,
Or that has sought to do so inside the boundaries of the city. The reason this is before you is because the initial thought, and I never tire of explaining this, and it's not very accessible, it's not very intuitive, but it goes like this. In spite of the property tax systems that we have and other systems that counties have countywide jurisdiction regardless, cities and counties stand in relationship to one another as separate sovereigns. They're not in a superior subordinate relationship. No ordinance enacted by a county has effect within the city limits, nor does an ordinance enacted in the city have effect outside the city limits. The only mechanism by which you can assess development impact fees is by an ordinance or the code. And so a countywide ordinance assessing development impact fees cannot be in effect inside the city limits. So in a similar vein as to area of city impact agreements, where a county passes an ordinance that says we're gonna just carbon copy some of Mountain Home's development requirements and use those as a county ordinance, duly adopted by the county commissioners. The county commissioners are asking the city of Mountain Home to adopt an ordinance for development impact fees adding ambulance, using their methodology to count widgets and square footage and so forth, and have that effective inside the city of Mountain Home. what they started out doing was simply assuming we could sign an agreement to do that. And that's when the lawyers showed up and rained on the parade and said, you gotta do this by enactment of the ordinance.
Got it.
So,
If I may, Mountain Home is a bit different than most any of the cities, besides the rural cities outside in Idaho. Most major cities have an EAS service specifically for that city. Or, for example, you would have St. Luke's that runs EAS. You have Acute that runs EAS, and these are all within city limits. Elmore County does not have a city limit EAS system. It is specifically EAS for the entire county. So it services the city, but the city does not have its own EAS service, emergency services, besides police department and fire. So when this is coming before us, I see it as if something is serving the city, then I believe that that entity should receive some form of impact fees related to that service. If the city had its own EAS service, then impact fees would only go towards that, just like it goes to fire. Because counties, like rescue, for example, we don't receive anything, and fire department does county stuff as well,
Yeah.
right? So because it is being served within the city limits of Mountain Home, I mean, that's the big push of impact fees for that service.
Yeah, no, and I think that makes perfect sense, as long as this is specifically just for a service that we utilize within the city and not.
to be crystal clear, development impact fees do not pay for services. They never have, they never will, they're prohibited by law from paying for services.
No, but they pay for things needed for the service.
So what I was just about to finish that up and say, development impact fees are to pay for capital improvements that
Right.
that are necessitated by growth to fulfill that service.
Correct.
So that's another mantra that you hear over and over, at least from me and anyone else, is they can't pay for the guys doing the runs, they can't buy gas, but they can buy those things that have a useful life of 10 or 30 years or more, which you'll see in that capital improvement.
And
And then
go ahead.
Chairman McCarthy can go on about what they found and what their written recommendations are. That's, anyway, sorry, Mr. Chairman.
No,
Mr. Chair,
you're fine.
if we could have Mr. McCarthy come up and maybe even explain some of their top issues with regards to it, then that may also be helpful moving forward. And then also, of course, Mr. Mitchell.
Trying to extract me from the equation, I see.
Well, you're lagging behind, I wasn't sure.
Not so easy.
Go for it. Tell us what you got.
So, thank you, commissioners. So tonight, I think it would be really great just to kind of start with, I don't think a lot of people understand what a DIFAC committee is and the purpose of it. And so you'll notice in your packet, you were given the Idaho code, and it's kind of towards the back. And I think it would be really important just to kind of point this out before we start getting into the specific questions and that. And I won't try to take too much time here, but Idaho code 67-8202 talks about the purpose of these DIFAC committees. And you'll notice that the subsections of those talk about, it's really about the growth. And so to Mr. Schroeder's point about the CIP and everything, these items have to be listed for growth. So you'll see number 1 talks about ensuring that adequate public facilities are available to serve new growth and development. Number 2, promote orderly growth and development by establishing uniform standards, and so on. And so it keeps going down. So I think it'd be really important just to kind of note those while you guys are going through our comments and considering these packets. As for the specific final comments, yes, we are looking at just EMS. There has been some concerns brought up about the CIPs for jail and sheriff regarding the numbers and that. So that is why our committee was charged with only looking at EMS so far, and going forward, we'll just stick with that. Not to speak on behalf of our committee, but the general census in our comments is our committee is for collecting the impact fees for EMS. There have to be some corrections made to bolster and I think strengthen this currently one of the only potential agreements that's going on from legal scrutiny. I think there's a lot of data in there that really should be kind of looked at, and again, it's in our comments. There are some items listed in CIP that are for other areas outside of City of Mountain Home. Our committee was very, very adamant about if we went forward with this agreement, that they only need to be listed items for like the West Station for City of Mountain Home for EMAs, not a Mayfield station or a Pine station.
Yep.
And if any of the impact fees that are collected within the city limits, as Mr. Schroeder had pointed out, because that is part of that jurisdiction issue, that they should be stayed inside the city limits to support the growth that is occurring for that EMS portion. So we'd love to chat about any specifics you have on that. Just trying to give a 30,000-foot view of the project. I know we are on a little bit of a time constraint a little bit, but we'd be happy to answer any of your questions.
I'm in agreement. Those impact fees that are collected within Mountain Home should not be used elsewhere, except for the City of Mountain Home. And that is in your, is this going to be part of the packet that you guys hand over to City Council, should this move forward?
Yes, to my understanding, so the final comments will go towards, this body decides to move forward with the public hearing, and that these comments will be in the records that will go in front of City Council. And correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Schroeder.
So, they don't necessarily have to be sequential.
Okay.
I think so in other words, your comments should be in front of the City Council now, or in their hands anyway. They can take up the matter at a meeting and decide what they want to do regarding this recommendation. Because this recommendation is that the CIP needs to be amended. The county amending their CIP triggers, according to this code about capital improvement plans, hearing notice and an amendment and a drafted amendment to the capital improvement plan. We don't have that, and we don't know what their timeline is for that. So the ball's kind of in the county's court in terms of, and I forwarded these written findings to the county's legal counsel on the impact fees. So the bottom line is the City Council can take these written comments and then either reach out and meet with the county commissioners and discuss what their plan is, or the county's Development Impact Fee Advisory Committee, and their opinions. Your role is limited. Do we want to add this to the comp plan or not? But that involves a judgment about the wisdom of this and the calculation and so forth. But we don't have an amended CIP. These gentlemen have provided extremely detailed written comments about what's required, what they would need for an amended CIP. So.
So,
Where was it? So that, in other words, you could be parallel tracking this. City Council could be taking up a meeting with the commissioners, waiting for one, and then you could still decide. You could schedule a public hearing right now and say, we're going to consider whether or not we should amend our comp plan to include this CIP. And the answer, I think, you're going to come to is not this one. The
No.
answer would be no. But then you've wasted a whole public hearing, so maybe somebody could tweak this thing before we get those all scheduled. Is that, okay. So I'm not babbling, that's good.
no, I mean, at least that's where I'm at. Thoughts?
I have one more question, if I could. Where are we at with the state recognizing it as an emergency service? Or, I think I saw an article where you were actually in part of that conversation at one point. So, emergency service, EMS, EAS. I thought the state doesn't currently recognize it as that, right? So they're not included with state funds and stuff, right?
I don't know anything about what.
Saw it on Google, and you were quoted.
No, the state. Okay. So
Sorry.
Was this one from my previous
Your
career?
yes,
Yeah.
your part-time job.
Yeah. That was over state, not state recognizing it. The
Right.
state recognizing its role and responsibility to fund and
Correct.
pay for it.
Right.
Okay. Thank you.
Sorry.
just to be clear to everyone,
I should have kept the Google article open.
there's no question,
like, so
there's no
207
question
there.
about whether the Elmer Ambulance Service is recognized by the state.
Right.
The state, in terms of funding it,
Funding it, right,
and
that's what,
putting it under the division of, the military division and their emergency services, that bill passed.
right.
I don't know where they're at in terms of funding it.
A year out from what I saw. So it'll be on fiscal year 26, what the article said at least,
Okay.
because the governor signed it in. So I think it adds another wrinkle to this, doesn't it, or not?
It,
Am I putting you on the spot, Jeff? I'm sorry.
It does, but there's no way to know
Right,
the degree to which it's gonna, it's designed to positively, it's supposed to positively impact specifically counties like Elmore Valley and Boise.
That's
who
what I
don't
read,
have a
right.
sufficient tax base to pay for the influx of people from not around here who get hurt in our hills.
Right.
So, but
am I muddying the waters? Is that what I'm doing?
not,
Kind
not
of.
really, it's,
Tourist tax.
we're years out from knowing whether, the degree to which it'll have a positive effect on emergency medical services.
Gotcha.
I'll put it that way.
Okay.
I wouldn't hold my breath waiting for funding.
Well-
We're still watching the aftermath of them trying to fix the public defender system in the state. And that's not going well.
Why do you think that it would cause an issue?
So if we're collecting CIP, or we are funding a CIP that the state now takes over and says we're responsible for funding this, now what do we put a stipulation in this plan or in this agreement with the county that says if the state takes over, it will be reassessed as
Does
to
the
our
state
role?
pay fire? Does the
Second?
state pay police?
No.
What's that? No.
But
But-
they intend to some degree, and I haven't read that
Right.
bill, and I only vaguely remember the other one, but
Right.
they will take over some of the functions and some of the funding for these cash-strapped, smaller.
Jeff, can you write the verbiage of a sunset clause in it then?
Well, no, so I think, I don't think in any event the state is planning to bite off capital improvements. I
Right.
think you're still gonna need capital.
Okay, that's what I was getting at.
Yeah.
Right. So the state's going to pay for gas, going to pay for stuff like that, right? That those are services that we're not necessarily paying for, right?
Right,
Okay.
they could, again,
But yeah, we know the limitations, right?
yeah,
So.
one doesn't hold one's breath.
Well, yeah, they also wait for federal grants, and those aren't coming around anytime soon either. So, no, that I was just trying to get clarification on what that bill meant.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Since it did just pass, I think it's 207 or something like that, that the governor just signed, and it does recognize and puts it over to the military. What is it, state military something or other? So I didn't know exactly what that impact, because I don't speak legalese very well, so I need some translation.
No, it's perfect.
So I just wanted to make sure that we're not biting off something that is going to be funded later that, no offense, but the county can use for making gold faucets instead of normal. You know what I'm saying? Like,
No.
federal government get ripped off all the time, right? So,
Even if the state did
Mhm.
come in, then we could refund that to developers. State said, oh, we're gonna build your ambulance stations, and we would refund the money to the builders.
gotcha. Okay. So we don't need to put anything in here. It's just,
I know.
okay. Roger that. That was my concern. So I did do some research. Don't look at me like that. No, I'm all like, we need EMS, right? I mean,
Yeah,
that's bottom line, right? But
Everybody.
I think I like the comments because they look very well thought out. I know somebody on that committee, and I get briefed on this quite a bit. So if you guys got more questions, please feel free. But I am very well versed on this conversation.
We're sure you are.
Commissioner Drake, if I can readdress your question about the Mayfield.
Yeah.
So, page 2 of our comments gives an overall concern of everything about the CIP specifically for us that we feel is very important. But there are things about the Mayfield specifically. So on page 7 of the CIP, it talks about impact committee comments on the CIP, and the concern is Mayfield facilities, vehicles, and equipment should not be included in the Mountain Home CIP as it raises the cost of impact fees collected and supports the development outside the city of Mountain Home.
Okay.
So, things of that. I will say, Mr. Alan Roberts was very diligent and with our committee and answered great questions. He did bring up some great data, and he, is it 67%? 67% of their calls in 2024 were inside the city limits. So that's why, again, our committee believes that there should be those impact fees, but going back to Commissioner Drake's comments of the staying inside the city limits is that's the paramount piece of that, so, please.
If I may too, to add to that, or to contribute to that particular topic. So, the biggest holdup, I think for many of us, has been just erroneous information that was included in the CIP with the county. So I am on the county DIFAC as well as the vice chair. And it was nearly unanimous that the committee denied or rejected the CIP from the county and the impact fees. So there was one person that said, yes, we agree with it. That was it. So there's been virtually no contact with the county DIFAC. There's been no discussion about what's happening with the city and supposed cooperation. We had a joint meeting, one joint meeting, and of the 8 members, only 3 of us showed up. And of the 8 members, I think 2 of us ever said anything. So there's a lot of concern about just having information that's incorrect. That does lead to legal challenges. That's very real. So as solid as the methodology was, you cannot get good, accurate information if you're feeding the machine garbage. So there was near intransigence in changing the CIP for reasons that I think we all understand. Changing a CIP is a long endeavor. But more specifically to the point that Brendan is making. So that's been some of the angst. We do agree with the EMS. Some things were said. I don't know if any of you commissioners were privy to the conversation with the joint meeting. It was uncomfortable, one could say. In that trying to strong arm people with information that's incorrect doesn't work. And it only goes so far. And when you have the facts at your disposal, it's easy to rebut incorrect information, which is what happened. So what we discussed doing during our meetings was to ask Alan, the very person that knows the most about the EMS, and to say, look, we're not against you at all. This isn't a matter of charging developers, because developers don't pay impact fees, by the way. That gets passed on down the line. They don't pay a cent. So the concern is, how do we make sure that we cover our costs, if we cover our costs, and maintain the service that we have, the level of service. Alan was very good at answering the questions that we had in a manner that was satisfactory, I would say. One thing that I would like to note is my long-winded response here. Both Alan, the attorney for the county, and a county commissioner mentioned that they have existing financial shortfalls. Existing. This has nothing to do with growth. They collect $580,000 or thereabouts to fund EMS countywide, and it costs them $3 million a year. You're not going to collect $2.5 million a year in impact fees. So they said that there's additional funding, but they have shortfalls. I think we should be concerned about that. So as part of correct me if I'm wrong, if it made it into the comments, the state code says that your body, our body, city council should be discussing alternate funding mechanisms to pay for shortfalls, to pay for deficiencies. No such conversations have been had, at least not with us. So this is not a stopgap. I'm still concerned about the longevity. How does this affect? How does this affect the functioning of the city and the county long term? And that's not a conversation that's been had.
That's true. And that's one of the questions I had is how did this get prompt because of the shortfall? I didn't realize there was a shortfall because how were they doing it in the past? And yeah.
Well, great question, Mr. Chair. I'll jump in. Please add to what I'm about to say. I'll truncate this. Great question. Like I said, there's no plan.
Right.
It was never shared on the county side. It certainly wasn't shared to our committee. What was said is that, well, if we collect $300,000 in a year or so, that's $300,000 we didn't have. That's not a plan. So Mr. Roberts assured us that he is simply trying to recuperate what he thinks is the cost of growth. That's rock solid. That's a great answer. To the city of Mountain Home. So 67% of the calls, that's to the existing, that's not because of growth. The 67% is not all growth related. But I think that is a pretty solid answer, and at least as far as I know, I'm not an attorney, it's pretty legally sound, that he is looking to collect on growth and growth alone. And that was one of the reasons why I said, yes, I think that this makes sense. Did I answer your question?
Yeah, yeah. And the other question I had was sorry, different pages, that you think the 2031 population is erroneous or spurious data that's inflated. Do you, because that I'm looking at for my own personal reason, it seems like it's fluctuating.
Great question. So back to your point though, real quick, that the deficiencies was not, it's listed in our comments of concern, and then also no funding sources under the methodology in our report. Commissioner Roder, that was a great question on the population. So you see in our final comments on page 4,
Yep.
there's figure 25 that gives out the 10-year projected residential and non-residential growth. When you go through these numbers, and we actually,
Are you getting it?
we were given a booklet, so it makes it a little easier.
Are you getting it from the American, it's a census, ACS?
U.S. Census Bureau. Yeah.
The ACS, American, I forgot the acronym, but I should know it because I've been studying the dumb stuff.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
the consultant who had done this CIP had used the census data to start off, correct me if I'm wrong. But as you'll notice on figure 25, first we have a base year of 2021, and this is in our comments. And to Terrence's credit, he actually had brought this up in our last meeting and found this. If I can find this, sorry. It lists the population for 2021 as the base year of 27,342. When you look at the census data, that number is closer to the 2010 base. So you're already starting off with a base number that's skewed, we will say.
Yeah, I remember past meeting we talked about CIP and it seemed like it was way off. Or not the CIP, but the population growth. Excuse me.
It's about 1,300 off.
Yeah.
And so the figure, if I can,
Yeah, I'll take over.
so figure 25 states the population is actually lower than what the U.S. Census said that the population was at that time.
And the problem is they don't give you a statistical confidence level of 90-95% or anything like that. It just, here's the number, throw it on a wall, and there it is.
And explaining it's difficult. I did my best to fumble my way through the explanation of why that's important. We sit at roughly a 1% growth rate every year. Sometimes it's a little closer to 1.5, but sometimes it's less than 1%.
Right.
And because there are natural restrictions to growth here. We don't have a large multifamily contractor. We don't even have, to be honest, like a large-scale subdivision contractor that does housing. So we've got really good commercial contractors, and then we have like specialty home builders here, but nobody that builds en masse. So, and that explains why, the good years, we have 110, 120, 130 building permits, and we're lucky to get that many houses per year. And you can track this, because this is information that is provided. So if the figure in figure 25 states the population is 27,300 and something, 342, and the actual population is 28,666, I think. It's ominous. 28,000, we'll say 28,500. So that's a difference of roughly 12 to 1,500 people. Well, at a population growth of 1%, you're looking at, it makes it look like we've grown faster than we really did for the first 5 or 6 years. That can be used according to tables. Oh, look, we're growing at that rate we said we were. No.
But then you get the variable in the city of the sewer connections. That's going to be raise its ugly head as well.
Sorry, can someone tell me where the population is?
It's on
Page 4,
Four.
and also,
And page 5.
there's a summary on that, page 5, under comments of concern, another bullet.
Yeah, I looked at 4 and 5. Not 4. That's 5.
this
I don't have those.
This one.
No, sir. This one.
Under the comments of concern, it summarized a little bit of what Taryn is talking about. In addition, figure 25 shows the 2021 base population to be 27,342. This shows the 2020 population to be 28,666. So this is kind of what we're going into of that.
I find it interesting that this 27,342 is the exact same number for vehicle trips. The exact same number as vehicle trips. So at some point, someone just could have easily clicked the wrong cell. Right? I mean, it's in every single table, 27,342, 27,342, and then you get to here and you go 27,342.
And that's within the CIP itself. So if you go and look at the U.S. Census data, so if you're triangulating, trying to figure out what information is correct, it's actually a good observation, Commissioner Waller. If you look at the tables that are used for the sewer projections, if you look at the transportation studies provided by the city and by the county at different times by different entities, so different third parties, they're all over the map.
And then if you look at the American Community Survey through the census, which is subset census, there's another census database that, based on my research, I'm showing 2.7 for the city when I compare it to other cities. But are they thinking the projection of speculative of Micron and all that coming in, and that's kind of putting that variable in the mix that's muddying it up even more?
Yeah, when they do their studies, so probably the best analogy, so Brendan, I don't want to interrupt
please,
with
go ahead.
your flow. So the best analogy would be, or the best source is a third-party market study.
Right.
Right? And so, because they look at permits, they speak to the city, they speak to the county, they look at the state data, they look at labor pool, they look at the demographics. Like in your household, if you've got, this is a military town, so what does a military family look like? So they're aggregating all of that information, as opposed to just saying, well, we think it's about this. So the U.S. Census, is a good source in that we can track it over time and compare it with market studies. And so, Commissioner Drake, I know you deal in the world of market studies as well. And so it's really good to get that, and then again, triangulate it with the information from these other third parties. The U.S. Census is, I'm not going to say the most accurate information, but it's certainly at least as
It's a
good.
benchmark, yeah.
And they do a better job of tracking growth and migration between states, which I think, so I don't think Micron, at least for now, is going to be that much of an influence on Mountain Home. In 10 years, I bet it will.
Yeah.
In 10 years. So how do we make sure that we safeguard the community
Exactly.
from today, moving forward to 10 years? So in order to do that, we need industry, we need growth, we need expansion of infrastructure, we need to make sure that our services are not failing already, which is why, I didn't bring it up, I didn't catch this until they spoke at that joint meeting, and they said, oh, we're hemorrhaging. I mean, we're bleeding to death with EMS in the county. And I'm like, oh crap, you use language like that, you're going to catch my attention. So the next question should be why? What's happening? So that's where Alan's information was so helpful, because it's not people in Pine. That's more expensive. 67 to 70% roughly of the calls are here. So if we're only growing, even at 3%, let's take it that that's true. It's not, but let's say that it is. Would that constitute 60 to 70% of their total call volume?
And then you made a good point, because you got to triangulate the data to,
Try to approximate the truth.
and you get the,
Absolutely.
Yeah, I'm talking stats now, but yeah, you know where my head's at.
I like it.
If I may to add to that point, so I've finally found the chart that I was looking for. So in the CIP that you were giving for Elmore County, on page 41, it shows the residential development projections for the county. And this is kind of where we started noticing the inadequacies or the information. You'll notice that by 2031, they're calling for us to basically double our population in Elmore County. And this is they have the percentage increase, from 2022, 3.5%, 23 was 3.4. You'll notice in 2026, it goes up to 6.3%. So it's just this data that we had noticed that we can't validate it, at least from what we've been able to find. We were going back and looking at permits that were for new residential, and that isn't a comment in our finals. If you do the math on it, they're talking about between these years that you'd have potentially 350 plus single residential family permits, new coming online. And when you pull 2024, the county has 42 new residential permits. So again, the census is great for a start off for these CIPs, and this kind of goes back into why these DIPAC committees are so important by legislature, is that we have to be continually reviewing this information and going back, because you can get off of that census data very quickly from, my limited experience just with this county, or this city DIFAC, and it seems that's kind of potentially the case here, so.
Commissioner Roeder, to add to your question, your initial question about population increase and whatnot, permits, checking the number of permits pulled in the city. And you well know, I know you've studied housing and housing numbers and look at the demographics. So I think in the city of Mountain Home, the actual house size, I think it's 2.2 or 2.3. So it's actually less than the average of the country, which is 2.5. That's the average household size. So if you take the number of permits, and we're at 100, let's just say 100. I think we're a little bit over that. Let's say 100. You multiply that by 2.2. That's 220 new residents. And so if you check that with the tables on population, they don't line up. Even if you use the 2.5 number, you see that they don't line up. And that's why we started to call into question the, not just the growth rate, but the population numbers.
I was just looking up a stat because there's another source outside the census that you can pull. I can't think of the website that I pulled it from. That you triangulate, because, like you said, that census give you one, and the thing is, you don't know what the percent of the statistical confidence level on if it's 90 or 95%, how accurate it is, if it even in. That's where my mind's going.
And that's why you check permits.
Yeah.
And you drive around town and count the number of new houses, wait until they, I live on the south side of town, which is where most of the growth is occurring. And so, out of curiosity, after I go for a run, I'll go and just check how many new foundations are in the ground.
Yeah.
We're not growing as fast as what's been claimed. I can assure you of that. And that's both concerning and both good. Concerning in that it doesn't match the numbers that I think that we all suspected or expected, and good in that we're not going to be surpassing these thresholds of alarm. So,
I might interject, sorry, I don't want to, but this kind of goes into, so if you have the population off, your CIP for what your level of service, now you're getting to the end of, okay, are you collecting enough impact fees to fund those growth projects? And that is something that we talked about of, this is why we have to have the listing of these different revenues to fill it, because, I understand and I'm totally agree with the point of, well, if you had $30,000, it's better than nothing, and that's why we need to collect impact fees when it's done appropriate and legally. But the concern is, there's time strains on these impact fees of when you collect it and when it has to be spent. And so if you're not growing at that rate and you're shooting for that level of service, now you're going to have a short funding of your impact fee funding for those CIPs, and you're going to have to go back to the taxpayer in the county and say, we have to use other revenue sources to fund these projects, because that's just the shortfall. It'd be nice, like I said, to collect it, but it's one of those that, in my personal opinion, agree we should collect it, but I don't want to see a study that causes us to just have the foundation for, you know, in an EMS station. I know it's a metal structure, but for argument's sake, foundation, and then we just sit there for 10 years, and now it's, well, that was a really nice way and good planning on that part, so. Sorry, I think we threw a lot at you. Any questions for us?
Need a motion?
I'm not sure what the options are, I guess. Is the option to move forward with it as it is, table it until we get a good CIP, or
I think today, the decision that we are making is whether or not we are implementing it into the comprehensive plan.
whether or not we want to move forward with it, right?
Chairman. Tonight is strictly just a discussion. There
Okay.
is no decision making. We just
There is
wanted
no
to bring you up to speed with what DIFAC has discovered and their concerns. Also to make sure you were introduced to the capital improvement plan from the counties. I don't know that this body has seen this before. It was submitted to you for this meeting. And so tonight, like I said, is just discussion to kind of get your feet wet, know where we are, continue to think about it, so that when we do get to the next stages forward, you'll have an idea, a better idea of what you would like to do.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman.
Jeff?
Just from a legal standpoint, there's a blend in this document, and I didn't weigh in. This is like policy discussion in terms of questioning numbers and growth rates. Those are all your province. There were two specific legal deficiencies that I identified to the county. One was that the land use assumptions were for a period of 10 years and not for 20, as stated in the capital improvement plan. That's an amendment that's required, that you can't legally adopt a capital improvement plan that doesn't meet that. And the second thing that was missing was K, under 67, 8210, or 82, sorry, I got these backwards, 12, 13. 8208K, a schedule setting forth estimated dates for commencing and completing construction of all improvements. In other words, that capital improvement plan had to have dates by which each of these things would be begun and ended. Estimated, but there isn't even an attempt at a schedule for those estimated dates. Those are the two amendments that legal counsel is advising this body, and the city council that have to be amended, and it's their CIP to amend to add those things. They're fairly simple, I would think, but maybe they hadn't thought of them. I don't know. I don't want to import that. But those are the legal quibbles with it. The rest are policy quibbles that are their problems.
Okay.
Commission, you good to move on?
Yep.
Yes.
Okay, no old business. Department head items, any questions?
Yes, sir.
No items, Christmas staff. All right, that concludes our meeting this evening. We adjourn at 6:18.
Sorry.
All right. Questions are good. Without questions, we don't have understanding.
Right off.
It's off.
So why don't they do anything like this school now? They, I'm looking at these footnotes.